South Carolina wins a few games, and all of a sudden they think they're hot stuff. They're big stuff running around, thumping their chest. It would take them 30 years of winning in a row just to tie the series with Clemson. I love talking trash with the Gamecocks, to the Gamecocks. But here's the thing. This team is different. And I'm going to try to give a semi-unbiased breakdown of the Gamecocks. But first, welcome to the channel. I'm glad you're here. I'm Brian. It's Rivalry Week. I have to pay attention to that because I want to say Rivalry Week. Welcome to the channel. Anyway, hope you'll subscribe. It is free. I can't believe we're here at the end of this season. So it's just, before you know it, there's going to be a bunch of terrible sports on that's not college football, and it's going to be miserable. But here we are. Let's enjoy this moment. Let's talk about the South Carolina Gamecocks. If you talk to any Carolina fan that's worth their weight in salt, they tried to be objective, chilled out for a moment, and just got honest in the preseason, they would tell you, and by the way, I've heard this from a lot of them, they would be lucky to win 5 games this year, maybe 6. But we get to this moment, and the South Carolina Gamecocks are 8-3. They are ranked, and this is the day before the new college football playoff rankings comes out. But, and that's after this crazy weekend that we've had with 6 teams in front of both of us losing. So by kickoff, 12 o'clock this Saturday on ESPN in Clemson, these teams are going to be ranked higher. This game's going to have more eyes on it than what it already was going to have. But this South Carolina team, they're coming in hot. And let's just break down and look at their schedule. I'm going to try to blaze through this. The very first game of the year, they played Old Dominion. They won 23-19. Gamecock fans, I watched that game. Their quarterback, Old Dominion's quarterback, turned over the ball so many times. You were lucky to win that game. And you looked like you were going to be a bunch of losers. Then you came out and played Kentucky. South Carolina played Kentucky and beat the crap out of them, 31-6. And then all of a sudden, you're like, whoa, what just happened there? The very next week, by the way, Kentucky almost beat Georgia in Lexington. Your next game was probably one of the most bitter games of the season for the South Carolina fans. They lost to LSU 36-33. There was a call on a return, on an interception. Nussmeier, LSU quarterback, got hit. The refs threw the flag and called the touchdown back. A lot of people were upset about that one. That's a 3-point loss to LSU. They played Akron, beat the crap out of them. Then South Carolina played the most schizophrenic team in all of college football, the Ole Miss Rebels. Lane Kiffin, the Bill Clinton of college football. You just see it in his eyes. He's always scheming. He's always doing something. If I wanted to get in trouble but have a great time, I guarantee you Lane Kiffin would be the one to help me. I just have that feeling. This is the only bad loss that South Carolina had all season. They lost by 24 points to Ole Miss. Remember, Ole Miss, they lost to Kentucky. Ole Miss, they just lost to Florida over the weekend. They're also the same team who beat Georgia by 18 points. Who knows? The next week, South Carolina went to Tuscaloosa, lost by 2 points to Alabama. They actually played quite impressive in that. They went on to play Oklahoma, beat the crap out of Oklahoma, the team that just beat the crap out of Alabama, 35-9. And then on November the 2nd, probably the most impressive win that they had all season. It's not, maybe it is the most impressive win they had all season. They beat Texas A&M 44-20. And that's A&M coming off of that big win they had just had. They beat Vanderbilt 28-7. They played and defeated Missouri 34-30. Just beat Wofford over the weekend. And now they're playing Clemson. Now, if you look at this rivalry, I'm talking about the actual game this weekend. Right now, Clemson is a 2.5-point favorite. Now, this is the Monday before the game on Saturday, so things can change. I'm quite sure that line will change, especially if anyone gets injured on either side. That's a big name that could sway the spread. But Clemson's a 2.5-point favorite. The game's, as I said, the game will be in Death Valley. Clemson historically has been quite dominant in Death Valley. But over the past few years, as the Tigers has not been as dominant as they used to be, we've seen losses. We saw a loss at home this year against Louisville at night. The last time Clemson lost at night in Death Valley before the Louisville game, you'd have to go back to, I believe, 2013 against Florida State. That was the team that won the national championship, too. I'm talking about Florida State. So Las Vegas is giving Clemson an edge because they're at home. But this is really a toss-up in their opinion. You want to talk about South Carolina and some of their statistics. Pulling some numbers for you, they have a top 10 strength of schedule. A top 10 strength of schedule. Some rate it top 15, but most I see has them in the top 10 at various places. Now, offensively, they're ranked 50th. They've passed for over 2,000. They've rushed for over 2,000 yards, if my memory serves me correct. They're ranked number 70 when it comes to passing offense. They're run heavy. They are run heavy, but they still can pass. I mean, you're comparing that with teams that passes the ball literally all the time, not trying to give them an out whatsoever. But they are number 13 overall rushing the football. Let's talk about offensive red zone efficiency. Once they get in the red zone, they're ranked number 70. So they're not always converting. Third down, they're ranked number 63, at third down conversion. Let's go to the defense. This is where they have really shined. They have the number 13th ranked total defense. That's a big deal. That's a big deal because they are doing that against really good talent. And Clemson's offense has its moments, but they are notorious, especially the offensive coaching staff, they are notorious when someone punches them in the mouth defensively, they go back into their shell. So that's very concerning for us Clemson fans. For rush defense, they're ranked number 12. So they're pretty good at stopping the run. Let's take a look at some of the stats for South Carolina. Let's look at the quarterback, Lenoris Sellers. Now, this guy, he's out of Florence. He's a redshirt freshman. He's a big dude. He's a big physical quarterback. He's 6'3", over 240 pounds. He's passed for over 2,000 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. At the beginning of the season, he was throwing the football high. They even brought in Robbie Ashford some to give him a shot because Lenoris Sellers was throwing the ball high. I mean, just, it is what it is. He did make the adjustment throughout the season. He is the second leading rusher on the team with 489 yards on the ground, 5 touchdowns. He's a big physical quarterback, as I said. Against Texas A&M, I saw a play where it was on third down. He needed to get to the marker to get a first down. He had a defensive back in between him and the marker. He literally used his body, and he didn't dive. He literally threw his big frame into that 5'10", 5'11", 190-pound DB and just beasted him. So, Lenoris Sellers, this guy is very athletic. His passing, he's pulled it together, and they're trusting him more. So that can present a problem for Clemson's defense, whose secondary has had their problems, but even as of late against Citadel, Clemson gave up 288 yards rushing on the ground to the Citadel just a few days ago. So that brings a lot of concern for the Tigers. Let's talk about the running back. Raheem Sanders, also known as Rocket Sanders. This guy reminds me a lot of Phil Maffa. Phil's 6'1", 230-ish. Raheem Sanders, Rocket Sanders, is 6 foot 230, somewhere in there. He's rushed for over 800 yards, 11 touchdowns. He's averaging about 5 per pop. And this guy, he transferred in from Arkansas. He was at Arkansas. No, he was at Arkansas, and he transferred in, and he's played very, very well in the game against Missouri. the game-winning touchdown. It was actually a shuffle pass to Rocket Sanders. He broke a bunch of tackles to get into the end zone. So between his ability to run the football and his ability to break tackles and be physical across the board, that does present challenges for Clemson's defense, a defense that has its injuries right now, and then there's questions about the efficiency, the coaching efficiency on the defensive side of the football. A lot of people are upset with Clemson's defensive effort at this point. So when you look at just those two players, you step back and you say they could provide some big problems for Clemson because they're both very big, they're very physical, they're very athletic. So you have to keep your eyes on them. Let's talk about receiving on the receiving side of the football for South Carolina. Now, I will tell you this, I've looked at the injuries up to this point, so some of these players may play this Saturday against Clemson. I really don't know if I miss a receiver or I name someone who may play who's actually injured. It is what it is. I'm not a Gamecock. But Joshua Simon, the tight end, is the leading receiver for South Carolina. I know he's been banged up. He has over 400 yards receiving, 6 touchdowns. He's a very big guy. He's very big and physical. 6'4", over 260. This guy's a senior. He can play football. He's going to throw the block, and then he'll fake the block and go out there and catch the pass. He's very much trusted by them. Also, we're talking about Bennett Jr. I think that's Mazio, whatever his name is. No offense. 324 yards receiving, 3 touchdowns. Rocket Sanders, talked about him. He's the third leading receiver on the team statistically with 268 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns. Nick Harbor. Nick Harbor is an interesting character if you're looking just from a football. Take Clemson and take South Carolina out of it. You're just looking at talent. This guy was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school last year. He's now in his sophomore campaign. I don't know if they redshirted him last year. No, they didn't. He's listed as a sophomore. The guy's 6'5"-ish, maybe a little taller than that, 235 pounds. He has Olympic speed. And they had him bounce around to different positions, some tight end. I want to say he played some defense last year. Don't quote me on that. And I kept looking at Nick Harbor going, if I were South Carolina, I would line him up at wide receiver. And if they say, well, and this is before the season, and if they go, well, he really doesn't know that many routes, find a route this big, fast guy feels comfortable with, and add one more route to it and just throw him out there. Send the guy long and let that 6'5" Olympic speed go up and get the football. Eventually, they started doing that, and the guy, he has 264 yards receiving, but he's extremely talented, and he can move. He posted up an Alabama defender in that loss in Tuscaloosa and had an incredibly impressive catch against the Crimson Tide. So this guy, he can move. They have other receivers in here. Jared Brown, the transfer in from Coastal Carolina, as well as other players out there. But these are some of the most notable. Let's talk a little bit about the defense. I'm going to butcher this name. I think it's Nick Emanwari, leading tackler and leading interceptions for the Gamecocks. 4 interceptions, 76 tackles total. Let's just talk about a little bit about their defense. Debo Williams, TJ Sanders. These guys are extremely talented. As far as sacks goes, Kyle Kennard, I want to say Kennard, but it's Kennard, I'm pretty sure, 11.5 sacks on the season. Dylan Stewart, 6.5 sacks on the season. Dylan Stewart is a freshman. He is a freshman. He was a big recruit for them out of Washington, D.C., 6'6", 250 pounds. The guy can move, and a 6.5 sack effort by this true freshman. Brian Thomas Jr., he is a junior out of Florida, 6'2"-ish, 250 pounds. The guy has multiple sacks this year. He has 3.5, but Kyle Kennard, this guy, 6'5", over 250 pounds, he has that many sacks They're going to apply that pressure. They're going to try to bring the pressure against Clemson. Their defensive line is very talented. T.J. Sanders has 4 sacks. Demetrius Knight Jr. has 2 sacks as well. Jalen Kilgore has 4 interceptions as well. O'Donnell Fortune, O'Donnell, I don't know if that's his name or not. O'Donnell, 3 interceptions, and then DQ Smith with 1 interception. So that's who they are at this point statistically, some of the teams that they've played. Now, how many games has South Carolina won in a row? Let's go back to their losses. The last loss they had was against Alabama several weeks ago. So they're on a 5-game winning streak coming into this game. And the SEC, as of this past weekend, started falling apart. A&M got their 2nd loss. Alabama got their 3rd loss in conference. Ole Miss got their 3rd loss in conference. And South Carolina is ticking up. South Carolina legitimately, now it's a very small chance, but South Carolina actually has a small chance of sneaking into the college football playoff. And you say, how? Let me tell you how. Rivalry weekend, people lose games that they shouldn't. So there's games that are going on this weekend that if happened this past weekend. If you're one of those people who's like, hey, you're talking if, but when. I agree with you, but this is rivalry weekend. And we see teams win who don't supposed to win. If that happens, this could benefit Clemson. Clemson, if they beat South Carolina, that will be their 10th win of the season. And whether Clemson ends up miraculously in the ACC championship or not due to a loss by Miami to Syracuse, Clemson could beat South Carolina and potentially end up in the college football playoff. Both of these teams have a small chance of ending up in the college football playoff. So Clemson can use that to their advantage, but you know that Shane Beamer is preaching that same message on the other side. Shane Beamer will probably be pulling for Vanderbilt as well. He'll probably be pulling for Texas as well, because that would be losses in conference number 3 for A&M and Tennessee. We'll see. So this is not my prediction, but I do want you to know who are the South Carolina Gamecocks. Like, really. I know it is fun to talk about how many years of lackluster football they've had. I know that they've brought out some really bad teams in the past. It's really, really funny. But Clemson fans, I am telling you, this team, South Carolina, this season, this edition of them, maybe it's lightning in the bottle and it goes away. But today, that lightning is trying to strike in Clemson, South Carolina, and it's been striking other teams. So Clemson this weekend is not a weekend for Clemson to prop themselves up on excuses or prop themselves up on a national championship from 8 or 6 years ago and talk about other things that's not football related. Clemson needs to come into this game, though it's at home, they need to come in with a major chip on their shoulder, understanding that South Carolina is not the South Carolina of old and that Clemson must put them in their place, because if they don't, if Clemson comes out and plays lackluster football, the Gamecocks will beat Clemson in Death Valley, and a lot of you will be in disarray wondering how it happened. Well, I just told you, though it goes against the culture of their football history, this year they're actually very talented, and they're one of the most dominant teams in the country right now. So Clemson's got to bring their A game. Leave your comment below. Let me know what you think. Also, if you haven't subscribed, I hope you will. Remember, it's free. I do appreciate it. Also, if you want to join on a monthly basis, there's a button below the screen, $3 or $5 per month. If you don't see it, you're probably on an iPhone. It's something weird they do. I don't know. But anyway, I do appreciate that as well. You take care of yourself. And as always, go Tigers.